snugged the old 22 rifle into my shoulder. I could feel it. It was heavy. It smelled like that old closet where my daddy kept it. I looked down the end of the barrel and I saw this little red dot. I squeezed, took another deep breath and squeezed, and bang! I hit the can and it went so high I could hardly see it, and I was absolutely hooked with the idea of doing something that scared me, that most little girls didn't do. Well, I grew up in the mountains of Colorado and Utah. This particular mountain range is the Wasatch Range, where my daddy and I were great friends, and one day I said, "Daddy, I need to learn to shoot the old 22. He said, "Really? Today?" I said, "Yes, today. I want to grow up and I want to be Annie Oakley. I've got the dog, I've got the fringed coat, I've got the little boots, I've got everything I'm supposed to have, but I can't shoot the old 22. So he said, okay, went down to the pasture carrying an old can, he put it on the post. And he taught me, he said, okay, put it in your shoulder, squeeze it, pull it back, and then breathe and breathe. And all of a sudden he noticed the tears running down my face, and he said, took the gun out of my hand, and he said, it's okay. It's all right, you're little, you're only 7. I said, and you're just a girl. Not politically correct in those days, or now. Anyway, he said, but let's try it again. He said, are you sure you want to shoot it? And I said, oh yes, I want to shoot it. So he said, okay, let's try it again. So I squeezed it, I pulled it in, I sighted down the barrel, and I said, I can't. And he said, why? And I said, because I'm just scared. And he said, well then do it scared. A pretty simple answer. And he said, do it scared. I tried it and I did it scared, and bang, I hit that old can. And I thought I was Annie Oakley. Now, honestly, I never became Annie Oakley, but I did become one of the first women female agents in the United States Secret Service. Annie would be so proud. The problem was getting there, and that's my story tonight, is how I got a job like that. That seems to be the most common question I have. The problem was when I ended up in high school and out of college, there were no jobs for women. You could be a nurse, you could be a teacher, you could be a secretary, but admitting you could type was the kiss of death, because you knew for sure that your pumps with those semi-high heels would be nailed to the floor under a desk the rest of your life. But in this case, I decided I was going to go to Washington. I was going to go where the action was. So a friend of mine said, I hear you can get a job as a secretary working for a congressman. Great, I said, I got the job. Yes, I admitted I could type. I worked for him in a couple of months, actually, after I started on Capitol Hill. This same friend said, you won't believe this, but they are hiring female bodyguards to guard the president and Tricia Nixon. I said, really? She said, yes, it sounds very exciting, but you'd have to be able to shoot a gun, and I'd be scared to do that. I said, I wouldn't be scared. I'd love to have a job like that. How do you apply? How do you get a job like that? I said, and she said, well, you fill out an application and you take yourself down to the Secret Service headquarters right around from the White House. So I did. I passed the top secret security clearance, which was a big hurdle in the 70s and the 60s, and got an interview with the man at the headquarters that when I walked into the room, I recognized. It was Agent Clint Hill, the agent who in 1963 had been the hero of my entire life, all of our lives, seeing this man jump on the back of the limousine in Dallas to push Mrs. Kennedy, our First Lady, back into the limousine after the fateful shot that assassinated the president. I'd never heard of anyone being that famous or that, shall we say, brave. It was a situation where he looked at me and he said, for the first time in 106 years, we are going to hire women in the Secret Service. It was a landmark decision. You have to be willing to protect and serve. You have to have integrity. You may very well have to die for the person you are protecting, particularly the President of the United States. Would you be willing to do that? And I said, I would be very willing to do that, sir. And remarkably, I was selected as one of the 5 women. Here we are, the 5 women who were selected as the first 5 female agents in federal law enforcement, particularly the most elite federal agency, the U.S. Secret Service. Well, I thought we were ready, and after our training we were ready. The question was the country ready? Well, let's take a look. This is an article that appeared in the Washington Post, and I'm going to have to read it because I have to get it right. It's so specific. It says, Dateline, Washington, 1971, 5 young women took the oath of office today as special agents of the U.S. Secret Service, becoming the first of their sex to join the agency in 106 years. Customarily, they would be referred to as pretty, or at least attractive. You're supposed to laugh at that. What reporter in these days would dare mention that? Anyway, this was the next line. Since this is true of most young women successful in their careers, they entered the room with their faces averted because they would be working undercover and were sworn in with their backs to the photographers and the television cameras. 3 are brunette, 1 a golden blonde, and the 5th had short, frosted dark hair. All had lithe, well-shaped figures. I had to look up lithe. Means skinny. I was actually quite flattered. But the remarkable thing was that this agent had not have any idea what we could do, the training we had, that we could break his pencil into 7 pieces and that we could take out assassins with our thumbs. We were tough, we were good, and we were ready to serve. They issued our equipment, a .357 Magnum, extra rounds of ammunition, handcuffs, a badge, a big gold badge. The thing that was really amazing, though, is they gave us credit. Look at this. Our own American Express card. Did you know, and the younger women, the older women will say, back in 1970, you couldn't get a credit card. You couldn't borrow money. You couldn't buy a car because women were not allowed credit. They couldn't get one with their own name on it unless a husband, a brother, or actually any male you could ask to get and sign on the note. But women didn't have credit. So I had all these pieces of equipment, I had all these things, and I thought to myself, oh my, I'm going to need a bigger purse. So we left, and I went to work. But first I put on my uniform. Hold on just a minute. I wish I could just go around this way all the time. I'd get more credit. I like that. But I did put on the uniform, dropped my glasses. You're not supposed to do that. All right. Put on my uniform and took on the serious part of the job. I protected the President of the United States and his family. In that case, it was Richard Nixon and his family. Protected the Queens of Spain, Indira Gandhi, Golda Meir. My office was the White House, the most remarkable experience you could ever have. It was so fascinating. I protected the children of John F. Kennedy, John and Caroline. I trained with the men. I made arrests in Washington, New York, and the worst streets of New Orleans and all over the country, making arrests for counterfeit money. Actually, people don't realize that the Secret Service is also responsible for our currency. And we collected and bought thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in counterfeit money and got it off the street. The point was, to me, I was going to have to do something that was remarkable. And how would I do that? And this is my first nugget of advice of how to do that. First, you got to have a backpack. You got to have a backpack full of stuff that you would never believe you'd use. I call them gadgets. It's kind of a techie word, but you know, it's not the kind of stuff you put on your your resume. Everybody had a degree. That was the ticket. Then you had to have, I had to be 5'7", be 20 vision, and the rest. It was the rest of the stuff. Remarkably, when I was in high school, remember back in the old days with Annie Oakley, I was the top marksman in the country for women. Beat the boys handily. And my old coach always said, a winner never quits and a quitter never wins. And I said that wrong. It's the quitter never wins and the winner never quits. But in any case, I had all of these skills that you never would have believed I would have. And I suggest to people that you have to collect these skills, particularly young people. You need to know that all of the things you do in life will come in handy. Nugget number 2 of advice, keep a sense of humor in everything you do. My first arrest with a fellow agent who was not happy about being assigned to protect with a woman or to make an investigation with a woman was a big guy. He could have played a fullback for the Green Bay Packers or the Washington Redskins, and he gets the deal to have to go with me to arrest a woman who's been uttering federal checks. She's been stealing them out of the mailbox. And we're walking down this hallway in a very bad part of town in Washington. We go down the hallway. We look down the hallway, and the doors are all slamming. There's something going on. And he looks at me and he said, "You're so tough. You break down the door." And I said, "You're so tough. You break down the door and I'll shoot them. I'm a better shot than you are." But we knocked. Sense of reason sometimes plays better. The other thing in the Secret Service is that it's all in the detail. Have you heard the term the detail, the presidential detail, the investigative detail? It's the cadre, it's the group of men and women and support staff that all support the primary protection of the president or whomever is being protected that day. This story I'm going to tell you about is one of the most famous details, and it took place when President Ronald Reagan was simply making a quick visit from the White House up to the Hilton not very far away, maybe a 10-minute drive, to make a speech in the morning, but the presidential detail treated it all the same. You plan for the absolute worst, and you pray for the absolute best. That day when President Reagan went to the Hilton for that speech, it went normally, and the young woman who was the first woman on the presidential detail had gone a little extra. She wanted to be better. We all, in those first days, knew that we were going to have to do it a little better than the men, at least as well. You couldn't play the girl card. You had to be good. You had to pay attention to every detail. So she did, and when the president left the Hilton that day, the worst happened. A young man named John Hinckley fired shots into the crowd, hitting the young man in the light blue suit, Tim McCarthy, who leaned into the bullets. Agents don't duck, they lean in. Jerry Parr pushed President Reagan into the limousine and yelled out the orders, "White House, White House," and they screeched out of the zone of where all the mayhem was happening. And suddenly Jerry Parr realized that the president had a small trickle of blood coming out of his mouth. And the plan changed. They wouldn't go back to the White House. They needed to go to the hospital. And he screamed, "Hospital, hospital." The young woman, the young rookie agent, had run the route so many times, she pulled her car in front of the limousine, cutting off the Metropolitan Police Department and leading them to George Washington Hospital, getting the president into the ER in under 3 minutes. And Jerry Parr, even though he's one of the most famous agents in Secret Service history and was given credit for saving Ronald Reagan, gave the credit to that young woman who paid attention to detail. I actually didn't protect the president in that kind of situation. We were too new. Sometimes they say it's better to be first than best. The best ones really followed me. But I was assigned to the Kennedy detail, to the children's detail, and that was a different kind of detail. Keep in mind now they're teenagers, and my job was to keep them happy, keep them safe, keep them alive, and keep them from embarrassing the President of the United States or their mother, Jaqueline Kennedy Onassis. They were teenagers, for heaven's sakes. I said I would do my best. On one particular day, Caroline and I had gone to school in downtown New York, And I drove her, and the details said that I would drive her, I would pick her up, bring her home, and back to 1040 Fifth Avenue. Well, she jumps out of jumps in the car, throws her backpack in the back, mothers and fathers, you've seen this situation, and says, I forgot, I have to go tutor, I'm going to go tutor. And I said, Caroline, it's not in the details, it's not on the schedule. She said, I don't care, I've got to go tutor. Go down First Avenue, I'll give you directions, and it's not too far. So down we went, I put it in first gear, and away we went, flying down First Avenue, and she screams, turn, turn. Well, I had been through all the training to do this kind of stuff. I knew the details. I was to look for anything that was out of the ordinary. When you're in a public situation with a change of plans, you look up to see if there are sniper rifles on the buildings, or if there are people in dark clothing or cars coming up and making an attempt to, in this case, to kidnap my protectee. Everything looked all right. I turned, I checked the oncoming traffic, I turned, and all of a sudden, bang, I'm T-boned. I can see the steam coming up the front of my black government car. I scream at her and I say, get down, get down, get down on the floor. I was reinventing myself that moment into the single agent with her at that time to do the best I could to save her life. I jumped out, pulled out my .357 Magnum and started scanning the crowd when this old fella comes kind of waddling out of this car. It was not a typical car, it was an old Caddy. I put the gun up his head as I rolled him over and I said, Secret Service, you're under arrest. And he looked at me and he said, lady, you hit me. So you do have to reinvent yourself, and what I found was that my life was wonderful. I loved my job, but I had no love. My sister, luckily, introduced me to a wonderful man from Abilene, Texas, a fifth-generation Texan who I fell in love with and moved to South Texas. I had to change my life. I was a mother, I was a stepmother, I had a house, a lovely husband, and even a dog. But I had to change my life, and I became a talk show host by saying, you know, when he said, would you be afraid to do something like this? I said, no, I wouldn't be afraid as long as I don't have to keep him alive. So I became a talk show host, I published, I did all these things. Then my husband got Alzheimer's. Dear sweet Cecil, he died the 4th of July. He taught me a lot of things about my last nugget, which is do it scared. We did it scared together, I reinvented myself, and I remember the last time I saw Jackie Kennedy on Fifth Avenue, she said, oh, Miss Clark, you live such an interesting life. And I said, thank you, Mrs. Onassis. We all live interesting lives. It's the determination to do it scared first, then be brave, then be determined to make things into what you want them to be. So what I challenge you to do tonight is to put your can on the post. Thank you.